Hello and welcome to the Common Sense Gospel. I'm Danny Simmons.
And I'm Kurt Norbert.
And today we are looking at our Against All Odds theme, and we are going to look closely at Esther. The book of Esther is in the Old Testament, and it is found between the books of Nehemiah and Job. Esther is an amazing book, and she is an amazing character. She gives us an inspiring tale of courage, faith, and divine providence. The days of Esther are written out in the pinnacle of the Persian Empire during the reign of King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus, and he's called Ahasuerus throughout the book of Esther. The reign of Ahasuerus lasted from 486 BC to about 465 BC when he was executed. As the book of Esther begins, in the third year of his reign, the king hosted a lavish banquet to display his wealth and power. He invited nobles and officials from across the empire. The Bible tells us that he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. That is 6 months that this king shows. And again, it's interesting to hear the Bible talk about it, that he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom. And the detail of that in chapter 1 is really quite amazing. So when the 180 days of showing off all of his power are completed, the king made a feast that lasted 7 days, so party's still going. On the seventh day, we're told, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he summoned his queen, whose name was Vashti, to wear her royal crown, show off her beauty to the guests, all of the princes and the provinces which he had power over. Vashti, however, didn't want any part of that, refused to appear, and this enraged the king. And so after consulting with his advisors, Ahasuerus decides to remove Vashti from the palace as queen, which was also done to prevent her disobedience from setting a precedent in the land. That was interesting. It was part of their reasoning. The king's decree was proclaimed throughout all of his empire. That's 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, also in chapter 1. His empire was great, the Bible says. The king's decree said this: all wives will honor their husbands, both small and great. I bet the ladies like that.
It might have been a little harder to honor a small husband. But there's the order. Do it.
If you're a husband, you have to be honored by your wife. That's all there is to it. That's in Esther chapter 1 and verse 20. And so in that decree also, Vashti is forbidden to ever see the king's face again. It says that she can never come before the king. And so after receiving counsel from his servants, because he is remembering Vashti, what she had done, he's without a wife. Servants, again, they step in and kind of help him with an idea. They say, why don't you gather up all of the beautiful virgins of the land, and we'll parade them one at a time in front of you, and whichever one pleases you. And, you read that and you're like, I wonder if he's going to be happy with this plan.
It sounds like kind of a tough ordeal to me.
Like, really? All the beautiful maidens of the land?
Yeah.
Come on.
That would get old.
Seriously. So he's thrilled to tears. He wants to find himself a new queen. He agrees to do this. Beautiful young women from across the empire were brought into the palace. And this is interesting too, because God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. And yet his hand is all over this story.
Yes, he is. He's really the main character of the book if you look past the surface.
Oh, but he is all over this book. So beautiful young women brought into the empire and brought to the palace. And among these young women, these young virgins, was Esther. We're told that she's a Jewish orphan, so her parents are both gone. We don't know what happened to them. But she's raised by her cousin Mordecai, and we're told that Mordecai sat in the king's gate. And I think that's important because Mordecai, as he's raising Esther, he has this prominent position of some kind. Not everybody can just walk through the palace, but he's there. He's in the king's gate. We'll see that he's able to step in and check on the women's area, to check on Esther, maybe from a distance. But again, you can't just walk in and go to these places without permission. We don't know any more than that, but Mordecai is a prominent man, and he's not revealed his Jewish heritage at this point. Esther, in her character as she is brought before the king, showed great wisdom, humility. She was very graceful, and all of these qualities set her apart. She found favor with everyone that she met, including the king. He chose her to be his queen, and so she set in place. Instead of Vashti, she is now the queen of Persia. And something interesting that I wanted to just point out as we move through this introduction is that We see her honoring Mordecai's will and his words. At this point, she could say, excuse me, I'm the queen of all of Persia, go away. But it says something about her character that with all these women being brought before the king, there's something about her. Mordecai's instruction to her at this point is to keep her Jewish identity a secret. And that's very interesting. So shortly after she's made queen, Mordecai uncovers an assassination attempt against the king by 2 palace guards. Mordecai reported this to Esther. Esther informs the king and gave Mordecai the credit for uncovering the plot. So the plot was foiled. The 2 palace guards, they're called doorkeepers. They were hanged, and the incident was recorded in the royal chronicles, though Mordecai received no immediate reward for saving the king. And so after chapter 3 begins, we're introduced to our bad guy, Haman. He's called Haman the Agagite, and he is more than once in the book of Esther, it says that he is the enemy of the Jews. He's the only one in the Bible who carries that name.
And it's interesting, he's an Agagite too, because that ties back into Jewish history.
King Saul?
Yeah.
Yep.
So interesting how that has continued on over hundreds of years.
Yeah. So in this Persian Empire, he is appointed by the king to be the chief of all the princes. He's in the highest place you can be. The king's decree concerning Haman demanded that everyone bow to him. Now, this causes a problem for Mordecai because his faith forbids him from bowing to anyone but God. Haman, it's interesting too, watching Haman and his temper tantrums and all. Everyone in Persia bows when he enters the area or the room or whatever's going on. You have to bow. It's in the king's decree to Haman. And there's this one guy in the room or, in the crowd who won't bend over. And guess who Haman's looking at?
Yeah.
He sees Mordecai. He is enraged by this defiance. And so he decides not only to punish Mordecai, but also to annihilate all of the Jews in the entire empire. He convinces the king to issue a decree ordering the extermination, setting the date for their destruction. And to finalize this plan, Haman casts lots, and it is Purim in Hebrew, to actually choose that day. So that brings us to Esther chapter 4. There's obviously a lot happening here.
Yeah, and it interested me when I was looking at Esther again in preparation for our podcast today. The little incident there where he overhears the palace guards talking about what they're going to do to the king, and then he reports it. It's almost like this happened and okay. It's just a little blip and it, glossed over almost. It's just this side story. And yet it plays a crucial point when push comes to shove.
That's right.
And you see from that, you see God acting in this whole affair because he uses that incident to propel the plan forward that he's going to execute through Esther.
Yeah. No, you're right. That is so big because, as you said, it's the linchpin for all of this to fall into place. But again, God stationing and positioning and just directing all of these things. The Proverbs tells us that the king's heart, the thoughts of the king are in the hands of Almighty God. So he's got all these women coming in front of him, and who does he pick? Esther.
He picks his Jewish girl.
A young Jewish girl
Yeah.
who's got character for miles. She's a phenomenal young lady, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But she's chosen, and so God's involved because we have the Proverbs that tells us that he will control and make these things happen. But we also have this lady who is just, think about what Peter says. It's not the outward adorning, because when she was sent in to stand before the king so that he could examine her or, so she could go through that process in front of the king, every woman was allowed to bring whatever she chose, anything in the kingdom. She chose nothing. It's like, well, are you sure? Because that's not going to win him over. Like, you can bring anything you want in with you. You could bring a musician to come in and to play some type of gentle music to set a tone. You could really get creative. And she says, I don't want to bring anything in. So the man who oversees the women, he chooses for her what should be brought in with her. And I think all those little pieces just continue to show her character and who she is. She does not try to impress him. She is who she is. It's just something about her. But the guy who's overseeing all of these women, he's already fallen in love with her, and she thinks that she's the best that's ever been. He's treating her kindly, much like Daniel, in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We've seen these things before with other kingdoms and looking and acknowledging these godly people. So there's just so much going on. And I hate to race through all of that, but chapter 4, we'll slow down here and look at chapter 4 and verse 1 says, when Mordecai learned all that had happened, so then now that, the Jews, they're going to be annihilated.
Haman's tricked the king into issuing an edict.
And Mordecai's in the right spot again.
Yeah, he knows about it. So, of course, naturally, it blows him away.
Yes, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, to take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. So Mordecai, he's starting to reveal who he is. Mm-hmm. By crying out loudly, sackcloth and ashes, he is beside himself. God's people throughout, again, 120 provinces, they're going to be ripped out of their homes and murdered.
And it's interesting that apparently Esther hadn't heard about this yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But knowing the structure of the royal palace, she's kind of isolated.
That's right.
Access to her is very restricted because she is the king's property, essentially. So she doesn't get out a lot. Not a lot comes into her. She has a very close retinue and servants and people, guards and all, who watch over her. And it is through Mordecai that she learns about this, because in addition to sending the clothes and trying to console him, she sends her people to say, what's wrong? What is all this about anyway? So Mordecai tells them, this is the deal, mm-hmm. and sends word to Esther, you got to do something about this.
Yeah, exactly. So we have here Mordecai's sending, he gives message to the attendant of the queen about the money that Haman's paid, and that he is pushing all of this, and he's going to destroy our people. It says in verse 8, he also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go into the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court before the king who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king these 30 days. So that explains what you were just saying. She hadn't been called by the king. She can't go in. He's still the king. And I think we forget and miss, it's not the husband and wife where they talk at dinner every night. 30 days she's not seen the king. And Mordecai's saying, you're our only hope. You got to do this. And she's saying, I am powerless to do anything.
Yep. She's really facing death. And it puts her in a dilemma that Mordecai clears up for her, because he points out to her that if you don't do anything, the fact that you're the queen is not going to save you from the fact that you're a Jew. You're going to suffer the same fate. So mm-hmm. if you don't do anything, you're going to die. If you do something, then you might die. But you're the only one that's in a position to do anything, which, there again, how did she get there?
Oh,
it's just this Jewish girl out of nowhere is now the one who has been placed in the perfect spot to take care of that situation.
And Mordecai is too, because he gets all this information. He's out in front of everything concerning the kingdom and the king's, being kept safe or made safe. Mordecai knows stuff, like you said, before the queen. So again, I think it's safe to say that he's in a position where he has access to a lot of front page news as far as the kingdom is concerned. And so, like you said, I think the other part of this, Esther replies to him, I haven't seen a king in 30 days. He's already made a law that you can't just stand in front of him. Anyone who does that's going to be put to death unless, and that's huge, he extends his scepter, which means
her presence.
you
can come on in.
Wherever you are, I'm giving you permission. If not, you'll be cut down in a moment. And so she can't do anything. But one other thing that's happening here is that Mordecai's been cooking for a while, just thinking, this has all been ruminating. What can I do to save my people? And he, as you said, he realizes Esther is the piece that is needed for victory, ultimately, for the Jewish people. She's not there yet. She's like, I can't, it's against the law. So Mordecai, now he's going to send a message back to her. Man, I even think about, the messengers who say these things, that somebody's running back and forth, Mordecai to Esther.
Yeah.
So they told Mordecai Esther's words. And this is one of the most popular and famous passages in the Old Testament. Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all of the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So there's that great message, and it's what we use in our New Testament conversations. Who knows if you've been placed in the kingdom for such a time of this, such a time as this? You and I know.
Well, one thing I was thinking of too, and we don't often stop and consider this, is what a statement of faith Mordecai gives there. If you don't do something, you'll suffer the consequences of that, but the people will still be delivered. Well, how? How does he know that? Why is he so confident of that?
God.
Because there's someone behind the scenes who can do it.
That's right.
And what he tells Esther is, it may be he's put you here for that. You're going to be the deliverer. That's why he wants you here. And so she just kind of acquiesces because she's got nothing to lose now.
Yeah.
And sometimes we look at that, well, she's just kind of fatalistic. If he kills me, he kills me, but I'm going to give it a shot. I really don't like looking at it that way. She has to put her trust in God also. She's going in before the king, whom you cannot approach unless he accepts you. So she's trusting in the king's mercy. There's a lesson there for us, too. We can't just go walking into the king without the proper avenue. And fortunately, Jesus is our king.
Absolutely.
And he invites us already into his presence, but we have to go into his presence on his terms. When we appear before him, we have to be acceptable, and he will welcome us if we're one of his. But you see Mordecai's faith, and that perhaps emboldens Esther. She goes, okay. And it's interesting what she does, and I think we see a glimpse of God here too. She says, all right, go tell the Jews to fast for me. Mm-hmm. Well, what usually accompanies fasting in the Old and the New Testament?
Prayer.
Yeah. It doesn't mention it here, but if they're going to be fasting over this situation, I'm sure there are more than a few Jews who would be praying to God also for deliverance, and she's counting on that.
Yeah.
And so she goes ahead and goes into the king's presence. And of course, that would be psychologically and emotionally encouraging to her also to know that the Jewish nation that's there in Persia is behind her. She's in their thoughts. They're lifting her up, and they're all counting on her. And so she moves forward with the plan.
Yeah, she's going to do it. Verse 15 says, Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me. Neither eat or drink for these 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. And it's like you said, she's still very secluded, protected. There's only so many people she can be exposed to, but she's got maidservants with her that she has some authority over. And so she says, everyone I have charge over, we will be fasting together for this moment. And she's not going to eat or drink for 3 days and then go stand before the king. So that's, I don't know what kind of condition you would be in, not having anything to eat or drink after 3 days, but it is very purposeful to set her mind and her heart to this work. And like you said, to know that all the Jews in Shushan or Susa, the city of the king, that every Jew there is doing the same thing, that you're not going in alone. Their lives are dependent on what happens next. And so the burden that this young woman bears, like you said, for her own life, but also for her people, if she fails, if she missteps, if she angers him and just by saying something she shouldn't, or it's just so many ways this could go wrong. And I think you had mentioned that, if I perish, I perish kind of thing with being Jewish. In the text, it doesn't show that she's revealed her identity as a Jewish woman, not until she exposes Haman. Then she says, he's going to destroy my people. Mm-hmm. And so maybe she could be thinking, I'm not saying anything. Mordecai's wrong. I'm going to be okay.
Well, once she decides to go into the king, it's really interesting to see how she approaches this situation. And she does withhold her Jewish identity until just the right moment. Because when she does point out that I have been threatened by Haman because I'm a Jew, that is huge impact. That's going to hit the king. Because we can see he holds Esther in high regard.
Oh, yeah.
When she comes, now we need to get the right picture. You come to the throne room. She just doesn't walk in and hope the king holds up the scepter. She goes, there's the entry hall. She goes there and stops, and the king sees her. Now, at that point, he makes his choice. Mm-hmm. He can say, I don't want anybody in here. Now she's dead. If he says, no, she can't come in. But when he sees her, he holds up the scepter. And then she comes in before him and touches it to show that she is grateful and has been accepted into his presence. But here, as I mentioned again, she's putting her trust in the king. And as you said earlier, there's something about her. Now, here had been this parade of beautiful women. And so when Esther comes in, she's another beautiful woman. I mean, whose beauty is going to stand out in this retinue to the extent that, well, she's special. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessarily her beauty. It was what he saw in her, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke. I don't know what it was, but that's what set her apart. And so the king appreciates that greatly. Yeah. And when she comes, he beckons her in and she makes her plea. Well, she doesn't even make a plea. She issues an invitation, which is an interesting way that, as I mentioned, that she approaches it. Yeah,
and that's the final part of my reading. I think just her taking this bold step. It says in chapter 5 and verse 1, now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said to her, what do you wish, Queen Esther? I like that. What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom. And as you said, as we move through this text, we'll see that she invites him and Haman to a banquet that she wants to throw. And so this is all permitted. At the first banquet, she invites them to a second banquet. So there's like suspense is building. She still doesn't say anything at the first one, but she says, I want to have another banquet and I want you both to be there. So this allows time. Mordecai is fuming over Haman is fuming over what Mordecai has been doing by not bowing down to him. And so he is in the middle of ordering the construction of massive gallows where he can hang Mordecai. And so as those gallows are being built, as you said, that moment where Mordecai saved the king and was written in the Chronicles and then forgotten, the king can't sleep. How about that? On a particular night, the king can't sleep.
The day before.
And he says, he tells one of his servants, bring the Chronicles and just read them to me. That'll put anybody to sleep.
Yeah, really.
So they're reading through the Chronicles and they read to him what Mordecai did to save the king, him. And then he says, well, what's been done for Mordecai? And nothing. And so now he's like, I'm going to do something. He saved my life. So the next morning, again, the timing is the first person to walk into the room to be with the king is Haman.
Yep. Because he's going to request Mordecai's life.
Right. But the king speaks first and says, Haman, if you were going to honor a man, someone deserving of great recognition, what would you do for such a man? And Haman thinks it's him.
Yeah, what an ego. Of course, we see that all through here.
Yeah. He's already been promoted.
Everything's about him.
Yeah, he's got reason to believe it.
It leads to his downfall.
Yes. And in what Haman recommends and suggests is also hilarious because he's like, just a grand royal parade, set him on your best horse.
Basically treat him as if you were a king.
Yep. And so the king says, that's a great idea. Go get Mordecai.
I wish I could have been a fly on the wall because just to see the look on Mordecai's face, Mordecai, Haman. Here we're getting our characters crossed.
I know.
To see the look, his reaction must have just been amazing because here he is all puffed up. As the text says, whom would the king delight to favor more than me? And so since he's assuming he's the one that's going to be favored, he just lays it on thick.
Yeah.
Oh, man, okay, honor me almost as much as you would be honored. And yet, as you said, in a second, the whole thing turns around.
Just flips over
upside down. That's a great suggestion, Haman. Go and do it right away for Mordecai.
The one guy you hate.
Yeah. And he's got to do it.
I know. So he takes the royal apparel. He has the royal horse. He brings all of this stuff to Mordecai. He's got to clothe him. That whole thing would have just burned him up. So he's doing what the king told him to do, and he's so furious. He goes home and he's in full despair, crying to everybody about how he's been mistreated. Now the second banquet, Haman's still a big player in all of this. He's invited again to the second banquet. And this is when Esther reveals her Jewish heritage and the plot that Haman had put together to annihilate her people. So the king's furious. I need you to remind me, he had gone out or something. He was so angry. Yeah. When he comes back, Haman's laying all over Esther because he's pleading for his life.
He got so angry at the accusation that he goes out of the room, apparently trying to process this whole thing. Okay, what am I going to do about this? Well, his decision is made because when he comes back in, I don't think Haman is touching Esther, but he has fallen on the couch because he's groveling for his life because he sees, to quote another book, the handwriting on the wall here. Yes. He knows he's in huge trouble. So he has fallen on her couch and, sobbing and weeping and begging for his life. That alone is a death violation.
Oh, yeah.
The queen is on her couch there, and you're touching that couch. You don't do that.
Nope. No one's allowed.
So when the king walks in, his decision is made. He's threatening the queen. He's pushing himself into her presence. That cannot be allowed. And so it's just great. The servants pipe up. Oh, by the way, he made a big gallows over there we can use. This whole climax is just so exquisite. Just the perfect timing and the change of events and the twists and how it all culminates. It could only be that God is working all this. And yet we don't see any miracles.
Right.
Nothing's going on. Mm-hmm. He's just using events as they occur and bringing them to come to pass at just the right time.
Yeah, it tells us so much about God. And then the stakes could not be more high. The lifeblood of the Jews throughout all of the Persian Empire are at stake. And everything that happens, just even with the king not being able to sleep on that one particular night, the timing of all of that, God is absolutely the main character in this story.
And I think, too, if we look at what's the real threat here, then we have to see God, because this is a spiritual battle that's going on. If the Jews in the Persian Empire, which includes Palestine, what we call Palestine today, if they're wiped out, where's Jesus come from? This is Satan's attack to try to cut the line, because he knows that there's a son of David coming. So if he can eliminate the Jews, that's going to thwart God's plan. But God just subtly and calmly defeats the whole thing, works his will out without even drawing attention to himself, really, in this book. And yet the Jews are preserved so that Jesus can come and Satan's defeated in his attempt.
Yeah, it's amazing. Such a great story. These are our against all odds episodes. And the fact that the odds were steeped so strongly against Esther and Mordecai, that they prevailed, like you said, by the hand of God. But each person, and that's the beauty of God and his will on the earth, and how all these things play out, is that each person that we see and read about so far, and now continuing with Esther, they play an important role. They have things they must do. They have to have faith. She shows great honor and respect for Mordecai. She does what he says, So just you think about the simple things like the first commandment with promise, honor your father and mother. Well, Mordecai's not her father, but he brought her up and nourished her as her father. Mm-hmm. And so she honors him according to the Jewish law. He is very important to her, and their relationship can't be denied. When she became queen, she didn't kick him to the side. She didn't tell him, hit the road. My life's, I got a new life now. I don't need you anymore. She is devoted to God's will in so many small ways that if you just slow down, you'll see them. And it's a beautiful thing of someone who has faith in God and in his word and is living and abiding within that law and God working through that.
And of course, it's because of that trust that she put her life on the line. She trusted in King Ahasuerus that he would accept her, but ultimately her trust is in God the King to deliver her. And she was delivered along with her people. And that's what Jesus did too.
Yeah.
He put his trust in God, and he was delivered along with his people. He has brought a great crowd before the Lord. And so we can be too. We can put our trust in our King, Jesus. Mm-hmm. He has promised to accept us when we come to him according to his will, and he will deliver us. He will deliver all his people.
He wants to.
From the doom that faces the world.
Yes, sir.
And so it's a tremendous lesson. The odds against Esther were, it's up to the whim of this guy sitting on the throne. I've got to go in there, and it all depends on whether he holds up his scepter or not. But her confidence was in him. His favor was toward her, and God used it to save the people.
Yeah, amen. That's wonderful. Well, so we have trivia questions we need to do.
We do.
Okay. Let me ask you the first one.
Well, okay.
All right. I need your permission.
You have it. Oh, let me hold out my scepter.
I was wondering why you brought that.
Hey, well, I figured it'd come in handy.
Oh, Papa.
Trivia. Sweet trivia.
First question for everyone today. What are the first three words in the book of Genesis?
The same first three words that you find in the Gospel of John.
That is true.
So there's my answer.
Nope.
Oh, that
I need the
work.
words.
Oh, you need me to start in the beginning to give my answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Yes, in the beginning.
Genesis 1:1, John 1:1, in the beginning. Very good.
All righty. Here's my first question. Now, this is going to take a little thought, perhaps.
Oh, boy.
Name 6 of the 13 tribes of Israel.
Okay. Oh, I can do this.
Oh, you got it, dude.
Yeah,
Come on.
I got it. All right. So Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. That's in order. Are you impressed?
Hey, that's 4.
Benjamin, Levi. That's 6.
That's 6.
Naphtali, Asher, Dan, Gad. I don't know how many that is, but that's about all I got.
Well, I'm going to give you a gold star for the extra effort anyway.
Well, thank you, sir.
You did get 6, and I said 13 because that's really how many tribes there were.
Joseph,
Well, no.
Manasseh, and Ephraim.
Joseph got a double portion, so the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. But Levi is set apart as a tribe that did not get a land inheritance.
Right. That's right.
The other 12 did.
Okay, I got you.
But Levi, they're given that special position of being the priests of God.
They received no inheritance.
Yep.
They were cared for by their brethren. Yeah.
So we talk about the 12 tribes, and it's right. There were 12 that got a land inheritance, but you got more than 6. So well done.
Nice. I'm reading through that Old Testament.
You're the man.
I'm reading those names an awful lot.
There you go.
Okay, who had the most wives in the Bible?
That would have to be Solomon.
Yeah.
300 wives and 700 concubines.
Flip that. 700 wives and 300 concubines. Yeah. You want me to give you the verse? Because I forgot to write it down. It's
While you're doing that,
Kings 11, I think.
we often give a
3.
scripture reference for our answers, and you can read about the tribes in Genesis 49,
There you go.
just to give people a reference.
Yep. They're all named there as Jacob prophesies over each one of his sons. Okay. Yeah. Kurt and I are going to look into that, and we hope you do too, about Solomon. He has 700 wives, 300 concubines, according to my Bible.
He had more than one of each, which is way too much.
Oh, I know. And the only reason that the Lord tells us is because his wives pulled his heart
Right. They led him into idolatry.
away from God and towards idolatry. So,
Okay.
so today we looked at Esther, and
We still have one more question.
Oh, we do?
Don't be
Okay.
trying to bail out. I mean, you did well on the first one, but that doesn't let you slide past the second question.
All right.
Our final question for the day. When Paul went to Philippi in answer to the Macedonian call that we read about in Acts 16, who was his first European convert?
Lydia.
Ding, ding, ding.
Nice.
Acts 16:14. Yes, Lydia was the first European convert to the faith in Christ.
That sticks in my head because the Macedonian call was a man who says, "Come and help us."
Come and help us.
So they go, and the first one they meet to obey the gospel is a woman.
Yeah, and it wasn't a Macedonian. He was Greek. He went to Macedon later on,
Yeah.
but he had work to do in Greece first.
That's funny.
That's right, Lydia.
All right, very good. So now we have been looking at Esther as part of the Against All Odds series, and I'm so glad that we had selected her as part of this because just literally against all odds. And something else that we didn't mention, but I want to use this as we close today, is that her story obviously is a powerful example of bravery, faith in the face of adversity, and certainly against all odds. Her willingness to risk her life to save her people makes her one of the most beloved figures in the Old Testament. And she really, really put it all on the line and trusted, as you said. She trusted the king, and I think more importantly, she trusted in God, and that is seen in her life. But one thing that I think needs to be mentioned about Esther is that losing her parents, however that happened, that she's an orphan, and then Mordecai, a family member, steps in as he should, that she's not bitter. Why did God take my parents? Why now am I being raised by my cousin, who we don't know how much older he was, but he was older than her, obviously, in order to raise her and bring her up. But to put her in a home where it's not her parents, how hard that is for people to grow up without. And hearing the story of what happened to him at some point when you can receive that information, that there's just so many opportunities to say, that's it. This life is awful, and we just don't see it. We don't see any sign of that. We don't see any inkling of that. We don't see her bucking against Mordecai's authority when she was brought into a position of prominence. So she's just such a great, glorious individual to look to and say, I want to be like Esther. I want to be humble. I want to honor God with my life and allow him to do what he will, and trust that that's the very best thing that could happen, to let go of the reins, to realize that God is better when he's in control than if I were, and to live a life like Esther. So we hope this has been a great lesson and story for all of you. And we, as always, we thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. We hope that you have a blessed day. Continue to serve the Lord faithfully and honor him with your life.